I'm glad you all made it in before the storm. We're hoping the power stays on for the presentation. And there are always a few people who come in at the very last minute. So welcome to the Elmendorf Inn, which is Red Hook's most ancient public building. We are about to be entertained by our county historian, Will Tatum. I'm very proud to welcome Will to the Elmendorf. He's been here many times before, but not in this capacity. So before we start, I just want a few ground rules. This is being recorded, so unless you want your side conversations to be recorded also, please let's keep the comments down until the Q&A. After the Q&A, we hope you'll join us. We have refreshments in the tap room afterwards, so we hope you'll join us for that. Historic Red Hook is, as always, looking for more members. If you are not yet a member, we have membership forms in the next room. Our last program of the summer is going to be July 15th. It's a speaker from the National Archives. She's retired from the National Archives. And it's going to be how to research records of World War I veterans through the archive system. She also is a nationwide expert on the census, especially the 1940 census. So she's going to tell us some interesting tales about World War I, but she is the person to know if you like to do that kind of research. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Will Tatum, and he's going to tell us some tales.
I will.
All right?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. If at any point my voice goes off today, please feel free to wave your hands, throw things from the crowd. Same goes for any questions or remarks or observations you might have. Our presentation today is Tales from the Ancient Documents. This is an overview of a project that is now about to begin its 6th year. So we've had these programs all over the place in Dutchess County. I don't know why I haven't gotten to Red Hook yet, but the good news about that is I've managed over the past couple of weeks to go through the past 5 years of work and come up with some quality material for you. At least I hope it will be quality material for you. But we've heard it all in the Tavern Trail, so any thoughts or comments you wish to offer, please feel free to. So you've got two important images right up here that I want to start off discussing. That one on your left, the county courthouse, that is the earliest image we have of the Dutchess County Courthouse. For those who may not know, there have been 5 county courthouses. Number 5 is the current brick structure that stands at the confluence of Market and Main. All the previous 4 structures have stood on the same ground, so much for archaeology. But the great thing is, that means that we have this coherent point of continuity throughout county history on where the courts met. The other item up here is a shot from a former Bard College intern who was recruited right here at the Elmendorf Inn at one of the intern recruitment nights. Travis Brock Kennedy shot that back in 2015, and those are the ancient documents themselves, all made at this courthouse in Poughkeepsie. So what are the ancient documents? They're a fantastic collection of doodles by various board legal clerks over the past 300 years. I wish that was more accurate. We do sometimes have great ones like the horse and rider, farmhand, stable attendant here. But in general, despite their name being the ancient documents, these are not Latin, they're not Greek, they're not Hebrew, they're not papyrus scrolls with hieroglyphics on them. They are the remnants of all of the paperwork of the Dutchess County Court of Common Pleas and General Sessions, which began sitting in 1721. So that's officially where this collection begins. We're not entirely clear when it ends yet, because we're still in the process of going through and preserving it, processing it. This occupies roughly 300 linear feet of shelf space in the county archives. So it is a massive collection Officially, we know that it goes at least until the 1870s, because that's what our records management software tells us, but it could go all the way up until 1894, when the court system was reorganized into its current constellation. So what is in this collection? Basically, every style of legal document that you can think of. You've got a nice list of them there. Pleas, verdicts, things that lawyers love, that they live and die by, that still keep our, and this is important, receiving registry clerks. It's a specific type of registry clerk, but our receiving registry clerks on the second floor of the county office building are still processing the modern equivalences to these documents today. And the collection covers mostly civil suits. We'll get to the breakdown of this a little later in the presentation. These are largely civil cases related to debt, but you also have some criminal cases involved, and then some other sort of random bits and bobs of government work that actually provide some pretty, I think, you guys be the judge, entertaining insights into life in early Dutchess County. This is really a worm's eye view of daily life. This is the sort of material that's not normally surviving, that's not been written down for future generations, especially for the 18th century portion. But when we get into the 19th century portion of the collection, there's a little bit more in the way of supporting material. So first, because this has been an archival project, we have to follow proper procedure and tell you guys what has been done to the collection over time. So you know it began its creation in 1721. It reaches somewhere into the late 19th century. There's 300 linear feet, which is a lot of shelf space. But what's been done with it? Well, right up until 1955, not too much. Every time one of those courthouses burned down or was knocked down, they would take the ancient documents, move them to another location, move them back when the new courthouse was ready. And then in 1955, we have this guy showing up on the scene. This is Henry Noble McCracken. Some of you may know him as the author of 3 major volumes on Dutchess County history, most renowned of which is Old Dutchess Forever. You've also got Blythe Dutchess. I do sometimes forget the title of the third one. But thankfully the town historian is here, Emily Major.
The bus again, Will, thank you. I don't remember the third one either.
Well, that was my one lifeline phone call for the presentation, so from now on I'm on my own. Henry Noble McCracken was also a past president at that point in time of Vassar College and a member of President Woodrow Wilson's Brain Trust. So this is a guy with a lot of intellect, some historical experience, though no official historical training. And the county clerk at the time, Fred Smith, invited him in 1955, right after he retired, and said, could you look at this collection of court records and tell us, is it valuable? Who is it valuable to? What should we do with it? This is long before state archives even existed, long before there was any protocol from state government to tell you what to keep and what to throw out. So McCracken comes in and he says, all right, these are court documents, which should have been a surprise to no one who even read one of them. Then he said, they don't have modern legal value. Okay, civil debt suits from 200 years ago, I can kind of see where the statute of limitations is run off on that one. But then he took the major step of saying these are only of interest to genealogists, which to a historian of crime and courts like myself is a little bit of a dagger through the heart. And to help, and the reason for that is, to help grant access to this collection, he put together this index of documents. That is, and these are huge books, about half as tall and half as wide as I am. And they are arranged by the names in each document. And he only did the documents from 1721 to about 1800. He thought all the post-1800 stuff was more or less worthless. Obviously, he didn't know anyone in the town of Red Hook, because when was the town officially established? 1812, thank you very much. So, if you're ever in a seance and he pops up, make sure to let him know that important things happen after 1800. So for years, all we had was this name index. And 1800 gets you maybe a third of the way through this collection. So tons of material that had not been processed. In the 1970s, the Church of Latter-day Saints came through, they microfilmed the collection, and it was then available through them. But still, this name index was not synced up in any way to the microfilm, so it was a lot of guess and check. So when I came into office in the fall of 2012, Dutchess County Clerk Brad Kendall said, we need you to do something about the ancient documents. We've got a couple of issues, including access, long-term preservation, because the documents are in kind of rough shape, a little bit of disaster management, because our microfilm copies are getting worn down. So what do? We came up with a two-pronged method. The first prong of that was in-house. That program is still happening down at Dutchess County office building today. We are indexing the ancient documents. So we are recording these keyword pieces of data, the date of the document, the names of the people in it, the type of the document, the offense, the location, here rendered as city, and then various internal gobbledygook that only makes sense to us. And the other part of that project was to image the documents. So send them out to specialist firms who do high quality digital imaging, who are familiar with working with this sort of delicate material, and you put that all together, and what you get today is if you go to this URL, dutchessny.gov/ancient documents, and there's a card on the end of the table here that has that URL on it for you. You come to a search interface like this, and then if you plug anything you want in, for example, we searched for bastardy, which since we have a G-rated audience today, we can't tell you about bastardy. But if you come up for a forthcoming program elsewhere, you'll probably hear about it. But you can search for an offense, and it will pop up everything in the record that, at least that has been uploaded into the system, that is indexed for that. And if you click on one of these little highlighted numbers here, it will pop up with a beautiful full color scan of the document, which you can zoom out on, you can zoom in on, you can spin it around, you can download it, and do whatever you want with it, made free to you thanks to our funding from New York State Archives. And we've just received the okay to proceed with the 6th year of this project from them. And if time allows, and if there's interest at the end of the program, because we do have internet here in the building, I'll be happy to do a run-through of how this system works once you get to it. Because it's got its ins and outs, the software isn't perfect, but it's still a fantastic project. So now, we've finished all the boilerplate, we've gone through the boring archival records management part. I don't find it boring, some others might. Now we get to the stories. The importance of this collection is that it gives us these insights into everyday experience in Dutchess County. Granted, it gives us insights into the seedier part of everyday experience in Dutchess County, because you don't show up in court and thus you don't show up in this collection unless you've either done something bad or you're pursuing someone who has done something bad. And since this is a PowerPoint presentation, which I hear is sometimes a cause for snorefest in that time, I hope you all stay with us, but we've got to have a pie chart. You must have, if you do any form of PowerPoint. This is from our first phase of work, which was 12,000 pages roughly. We now have imaged, as of the end of this month, we will have imaged 105,000 pages of material. And we're about a little over a third of the way through this collection. I estimate probably about 10 to 15 years worth of work left to do. But looking at phase 1 gives you a breakdown. So as you can see, the vast majority of these cases have to do with debt. That makes sense because this is a civil court. You take people to civil court over debt, basically. But you also have some criminal stuff in there, including assault, murder, bastardy is sort of half criminal, half debt. And then this huge other portion here, which we will reference later in the presentation, are all kinds of amazing documents that otherwise would have been lost. They are the records of how government functioned in the 18th and 19th century. Because more or less, today we have the county executive's office and the legislature. They meet twice a month. They can pass local laws, local ordinances, decide what happens to the tax money. In the 18th century and through most of the 19th century, it was the courts who governed Dutchess County. And we'll see a little bit of explanation of that. But essentially, the Board of Supervisors, which was the governing body that existed before 1968, met a couple of times to just go over accounts, to make sure that charges against the county were valid, who gets money for this, who gets money for that. So the courts handled most of the business of governance. But debt. we've got to begin with debt. And incidentally, are there any Gilberts in the room? Are there any Chris Gilberts? One of the beauties of doing this level of local history is, of course, that Dutchess County folks tend to stick around for a long time. So you never know when you're talking about a case whether or not someone in the room will be related. You can generally tell when, their cheeks get really red and they look away. But it looks like there aren't any Gilberts or any Walters here today. So this is an example of the sort of debt cases that we have in the collection. And this is what just happened? This is the beautiful scan, the very actual scan that you would see if you went to the system and plugged this number into it. And you can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can download it, do all sorts of things with it. But because it is important to give you guys an idea for the flavor of these documents, I'm going to read this one to you. Prepare yourselves for some legal language. Garrett Gilbert complains of Henry Walters being in custody, etc. For that whereas the said Henry on the 10th day of January in the year 1798 at Red Hook, even though it's not 1812 yet, that is to say at Poughkeepsie, in the county of Dutchess and within the jurisdiction of this court, made a certain note in writing, commonly called a promissory note, with his proper hand and name thereto subscribed, bearing date the same day and year, and then in there deliver the said note to the said Garrett, by which said note the said Henry promised to pay on demand to the said Garrett by the name of Garrett Gilbert, or order, £34, 7 shillings and 10 pence, parentheses, equal to and of the value of $85.97 for the value received by the said Henry from the said Garrett, close parentheses, by reason whereof and by force of the statute in such case made and provided, the said Henry became liable to pay to the said Garrett the said £34, 7 shillings and 10 pence, equal to and of the value of $85.97 according to the tenor and effect of the said note, and being so liable, the said Henry in consideration thereof afterwards to wit, on the same day and year aforesaid, at Red Hook, that is to say, at Poughkeepsie, aforesaid in the county aforesaid, and within the jurisdiction aforesaid, took upon himself, and then and there faithfully promised the said Garrett, that he the said Henry would well and truly pay, and satisfy to the said Garrett the said £34, 7 shillings, etc., etc. You get the sort of drift of how this goes on and on and on. Even the sky hates hearing this. You can see how the rain has come down. Now imagine being part of the indexing team and reading this stuff every day. It starts to drive you a little insane, which is why you seldom find historians who completely have both feet in this plane of existence. So that was long, and we didn't even get to the end. But what does it tell us? So there's a close-up, and there's some stuff to read if you want to get another flavor for what we have there. So first we know, because of all that stuff at the beginning of the document, that the original incident took place on January 10th, 1798. But immediately we run into a problem. Did it happen at Red Hook? Or did it happen in Poughkeepsie? Because they say, at Red Hook, but then they said, by which they mean, that is to say, at Poughkeepsie in the county of Dutchess. Okay. It was a tough period in time. There was a lot of alcohol consumption. You never know. Levels of perception change with that kind of imbibing. What we probably have going on here is a legal fiction, because theoretically all formal documents were supposed to be done at the courthouse in Poughkeepsie, but obviously sometimes you don't want to go from Red Hook down to Poughkeepsie in 1798, so you do it here, but for the purposes of the court, it is happening at Poughkeepsie. And this we see over and over again at this point in time. So let's just say it's at Red Hook, because that works for this presentation. So the next thing, we know that on January 10, 1798, Henry Walters wrote this promissory note to Garrett Gilbert. So what is a promissory note? It is an 18th century credit card. Essentially what it says is that you are giving me, or in this case Garrett Gilbert is giving Henry Walters, credit for this amount of money. Normally these promissory notes will have on them, you can claim this money back from me in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. This one said, whenever you want, on order. And even more importantly, it's transferable. So Garrett Gilbert can say, take this debt, and he owes money to Cornelius Elmendorf, and he says, all right, Cornelius, I don't have any cash right now, but how about I trade you Henry Walters' cash that he owes me? And this is why credit problems and the whole credit card drama is nothing new. We just use plastic and electricity now. They used paper back then. And the other interesting thing we see in this is that translation between pounds and dollars. So when does the United States adopt the dollar as its official currency? Does anyone happen to know? It's an odd date.
1803.
No, because it's 1798 and they're translating from pounds and dollars.
That was very good at
That would have caught well. Historians are famously not good at math. 1792 is when the United States, the federal government now, because the Constitution is in effect, says everyone does dollars, but some of these debts are not in dollars. So now you have to do the whole exchange rate in your legal documents. So that's an interesting insight into Dutchess County in 1798 that we wouldn't have otherwise. And finally, we know that Walters failed to pay up when asked to do so. So it's 9 months later, more or less. It's October. He's being taken to court. And he's being taken to court, so the debt is $85.97. Mr. Gilbert wants total $200 in damages for this debt. Now, unfortunately, a great deal of the material in the ancient documents is fragmentary. You know, an average case would have maybe 6 or 7 different types of documents associated with it, and we might have one of those documents, we might have 8 of those documents, we might have anything in between. In this case, this is where the story ends. We may come across additional information as we continue processing this material, or this case may have been settled out of court, which would explain why there's no more paperwork on it. But that's more or less where we leave Henry Walters and Garrett Gilbert there in October of 1798. Not the most satisfying thing in the world, but luckily we have the next document for you, which is also a debt case, but it is a debt case that involves a lot more detail. So it's May 1790. Jacob Melius, and if you read down here, otherwise called Jacob Melius. Why would you have an alias that is your own name? Because you spell it 2 different ways. It's 1790 now, and they've decided, you know that whole variable spelling thing from the 18th century, where you would spell the same word 3 different ways on the same side of a piece of paper? We don't like that anymore. So if you're going to insist on not spelling your name the same way every time, we're going to make it an alias. So Jacob Melius is going after Herman Hoffman. Herman Hoffman has done the promissory note thing. But wait, there's another name down here, this Leonard Tenbrock. What does that mean? Well, when you take this case apart from the beginning, and don't worry, I won't read this one to you because it's much longer and even more tedious. This case takes us all the way back to September 17th of 1785, when Herman Hoffman writes a promissory note to Leonard Tenbrock, or his order, that's going to be important, for 14 pounds and 10 shillings. There's no mention of Red Hook in any pardon here so far. A year goes by, it's October of 1786, Leonard Tenbrock has not collected this debt yet, but he decides to notarize the debt over to this Jacob Melius fellow. Again, it's one of these switches where you can trade debt back and forth. The banks still do it today. And so by the time that May of 1790 rolls around, Jacob Melius has been trying to collect this debt from Herman Hoffman unsuccessfully. So Jacob Melius brings him to court. It's not 1792 yet, so everything is in pounds and shillings. The debt is for 14 pounds, 10 shillings, but Melius wants 50 pounds in damages. What does that mean in actual buying power? Consider that your common farmer in Dutchess County during most of the 18th century earns about 4 pounds a year. So this is not an inconsiderable debt to begin with, but with the damages added, it becomes fairly significant. Normally, that's where everything would stop, but we have more documents. So now we have what's called a confession of judgment. A confession of judgment is essentially when you know you're wrong, and you know they're going to get you. So you go to your lawyer, you draw up this document that allows any lawyer to go to any court of record, any legal court, and essentially enter a guilty verdict on your behalf. Now, this is February of 1790. The court case is May of 1790. We're going back in time here. It's February 1790. We get a few more details of the case. First, we learn that Leonard Tinbrock, to whom the original promissory note was sworn out, is a captain, and he lives up in Columbia County. We don't know if he's captain of the ship, if he's a captain of the militia, but we at least have that part. We also learn that Henry Hoffman is from Red Hook, because he says it right there at the beginning of the document. Very handily. Why couldn't you have said that in the narration? Who knows? But through this entire document, Hoffman lays out all the facts. Yes, I made out this promissory note to Leonard Tinbrock. Yes, Leonard Tinbrock signed it over to Jacob Melius. It's all legal, it's all good, everything's fine. And I promise that I will have this debt paid by May 1st, 1790, or you can take me to court and enter this as an automatic guilty verdict. So he's giving up all of his rights to a defense. And he's also telling you it's February. He knows that they've got him dead to rights and he's going to pay. Yet we know by that initial court document that he did not pay up. And we know even more because now we have a bail piece. It's this weird piece of paper. It's the only one that's shaped this way, that Lawson shape. The idea that Jeff Huth, who's the head of the court's record system, has advanced is that you fold that in half and it's easier to stick in your pocket if you have that clip corner. But this bail piece says that the sheriff is caught up with Herman Hoffman. And Herman Hoffman has entered bail in order to secure his appearance at court. All right, so this is definitely going all the way at the suit of Jacob Melius. And then we go back, and you might notice down here, John Doe and Richard Roe, these are more legal fictions. You've got to have sureties for any of this prosecution to move forward back in the day. And since it's a pain in the butt to actually go around and try to find people who will put up money to guarantee that you will go to court, they generally do the legal fiction of these names of John Doe and Richard Roe. They're using these names from 1721 all the way on up through at least the 1820s or so. But now we go back to that first document for the rest of the story because the plea is written on the third page of it. And in this plea, and it's Herman Hoffman's lawyer who's entering this, he says, I have a confession of judgment. We are going to pay you, now I've got it written down here somewhere, 19 pounds, 4 shillings and 6 pence. The court accepts that, the case is done. So he didn't get his 50 pounds, but he got more than his 14 pounds, and that is the end of Mr. Melius and Mr. Hoffman. How terrifically bored are you now? Because that's like serious money stuff, which you see it's such a huge part of the collection. And if you're doing genealogy like Chris Gilbert obviously should, you might be interested to know that your ancestor was pursuing people for debt in 1790's Red Hook. And then you get the da-da-da-da-da. All of this legal language, and it gets really fun when they start dropping Latin into the mix. Basically, everyone who's worked on this project has some kind of half-decent knowledge of Latin, at least the legal stuff. So we mentioned that there's that big chunk of the record that is other. This is an example of other. This is a Ferry license. So what is a Ferry license? What is a recognizance of all sorts of things? Well, a recognizance is an old piece of English common law. Originally, it was a form of bail that you would have to fill out to guarantee that you showed up to court. One of the beautiful things about this collection, because it begins in 1721 and it goes all the way through the Civil War era and beyond, it lets us see the development of American and New York constitutional law, and also how the government works. And one of the first things we see after the American Revolution is over is licensing. We're all familiar with licenses in the state of New York today, even down to dog licenses. So the first licenses we see pop up, and sadly none of them have turned up for Red Hook yet, are tavern licenses. And how this recognizance works is it says, if you don't follow these conditions, you will have to pay this amount of money to the government. And the tavern license part, the tavern recognizances, they say essentially, if you allow gambling to happen in this drinking establishment, you will be closed down and pay a fine, because we've all seen Casablanca, and we know gambling in this establishment? Inconceivable. The next one we have is doctor's licenses, because, oh wait, you probably shouldn't let people practice medicine without checking to see if they know what they're doing. Amputations are tricky. They can end poorly. And then our third one, which we have here today, are ferry licenses, because if you're going to let individuals transport other individuals across the river, you might want to make sure that they have things like a boat that doesn't leak, or enough people to actually pull it across the river so that you don't get stuck halfway. Or regular landing spots so that they aren't like, so you wanted to land in Saugerties in this case, but I'm feeling more like Kingston today. How would you like to pay a little surcharge to make it to Saugerties? So this is all about regularizing this. We can learn some interesting things, nevertheless, out of these licenses. So we know that William McCaffrey, and it's actually on June 28th, 1824, so very close to an anniversary for this document. He's applied for this license, he's gotten it, and it stipulates he's going to run a ferry from Red Hook to Saugerties, which makes me think Emily Major somewhere out of the Tivoli area, probably.
Yes, Outwaters Landing.
His one part is going to be Painter Outwaters Landing, so we know where that was. Excellent. We might see a map later, just to give you warning. And it's going to go across the river and land at the Reverend Peter A. Oberpaugh's land in the town of Saugerties. So you have your standard entry and exit points, kind of important if you want ferry traffic to move smoothly. It also gives the conditions of you have to have a safe boat, shocker. You need to have at least 2 men to work the boat, all of the stuff that you need to work the boat, and you have to run this during daylight hours every day of the year except Sunday. These are kind of all important things to guarantee, and if William McCaffrey had violated any single one of these and been taken to court, he would have sacrificed the sum of $100, which was pretty serious money back then. But even more interesting, you might ask, as I would, so this is all great, but what would it cost me to cross the river in June of 1824? Well, the other half of this ferry license, very kindly, has all of that information. Because you have to have stipulated rates so that people aren't charging you incredible sums of money. So for every man and horse, 25 cents. Anyone who's just on foot, 12.5 cents, and if you have more than one, you get a price discount. So if you're going to cross to Saugerties or come back again, bring a friend, get a reduced rate. Loaded wagons are $1, but if they're empty, it's a less charge. Chair and horse. Does anyone know what a chair and horse would be? Otherwise known as a riding chair. It is the hot rod. It is the hot rod of the 18th and 19th century. It is literally a chair with wheels on either side and very basic chases, the leather traces, that hook you up to the horse. So this is like fast, gladiatorial chariot style stuff. You had to be pretty rich to afford either a riding chair or a sulky, which is like the four-door model. So the riding chair is your Corvette, the sulky is a four-door, I don't know cars well enough. But it's important that they're like, all right, guess what? If you're going to be driving something fancy, you pay a different rate. If you're just leading a horse or a beast, you've got that. Hogs, pigs are very important. Cart oxen, $1, and then that's it. So we have all of that information, all in this lovely thing that you can connect in with even more detailed local history. So it's how each of these documents, even though they're legal and kind of boring with their repetitiveness, give you an insight into what's going on during the period. Road commissioners, these guys go all the way back to the beginning, and as you can see, we're back in time now to 1770. The road commissioners are the guys who are charged with making sure that roads are built. So we all know that Highway 9, basically what's running out in front of the Elmendorf now, was the major highway for most of New York's history. It's the old King's Road. Well, other roads had to be built to like get over to Upper Red Hook, what becomes Tivoli and all the rest. So you have this lovely, long, really crazily spelled report from the road commissioners for Rhinebeck Precinct. Because before you had towns, you had precinct. But the road commissioners are reporting down to the court in Poughkeepsie because they need to get the court's permission to do this. is they want to build a road that's going to connect Rhinebeck, which back in 1770, this was also Rhinebeck, to these two mills, Justice Livingston's mill, and then Jacob Van, they pronounce it Benthusen, or spell it Banthusen. It's normally Benthausen. I'm all confused myself. But anyway, they are asking for permission to build these new roads. They also want to close the secondary road to get there. All great, wonderful stuff, gives you an idea how tax money's spent. But oh wait, they included a map, which you can actually access on the ancient documents today. So this map, essentially in their written report, they have all of the abbreviations, what HA and FK and the rest mean. But they want to build a new road off the King's Highway. It's then going to go by everyone's houses. It's going to go to the Benthausen Mill here. Then it's going to connect up. And since it's Red Hook, we want to obviously have an up close and personal. But with the one online, you can zoom in as much as you want to because it's high fidelity. So you have Mr. Livingston's mill here. You have Red Hook. You have Mill of Hoffman's, where they apparently grind up Hoffman's into a very excellent supply of high-quality flour. You have Hoffman's Landing. You've got everybody's house here. And then you've got the mill of the deceased Benthausen. And this is great stuff that you otherwise would not have access to, that is just hidden away inside this collection. So that's the extremely specific Red Hook stuff. We're going to finish up with two stories from early Rhinebeck. And I slide these in here both because they're fun, and you guys have very wonderfully soldiered through all the debt stuff and Ferry stuff. But, Rhinebeck, Red Hook, they were once the same thing. Unfortunately, because they're early, we don't know where precisely both incidents happened. We do know where this one happened. So how many of you know you're going down 9 here, and you see that turnoff for the old Rhinebeck Aerodrome? Are you with me so far? If you're going south, it's on your left. You look to your right. What do you have?
Stone church.
Big stone church. Before there was a stone church there was a log church there. And in that church, in 1754, there was a minister by the name of Johann Christophels Hartwig. Is anyone here from Oneonta?
We're college up there.
Ah! Yes.
I'm not from Oneonta, but
That was going to be the thunder at the end. But we'll still focus on the violence, which is really what is amazing by this case. So this is one of a series of affidavits on salt. It's a really long list, as you can see here, of all of these cases. So affidavits are generally, the sheriff or one of his deputies will go around and collect these once a complaint has been made. And we're going to zoom in on one complaint. That's the affidavit of Elizabeth Reihart. So these are all sworn out on April 30th, 1754, relating to two incidents that happened on Sunday, April 14th, and then Sunday, April 21st. 2 Sundays in a row, involving the minister, the Reverend Hartwig. So Elizabeth Reihart appears before probably a justice of the peace who's taking this. And she says that at the Lutheran Meeting House in Rhinebeck Precinct, she was assaulted and beat with a horsewhip by Johann Christophel Hartwig, the minister of the said meeting house.
Really?
And she's not alone. There are 3 other people, all men, who testify that on April 14th and again on April 21st, Hartwig goes nuts. Another one of them, Martin Fletcher, says that Hartwig pushed and kicked him out of the church and inflicted other harms and misdemeanors to him. And in fact, he beat Elizabeth Reihart so badly with a horsewhip that of her life there was great despair, to put it in the language of the period. So, he is indicted by a grand jury down in Poughkeepsie on May 21st of 1754 for making, this is just one of the multiple people that he assaulted. And he's just, if you can imagine it, he suffers a break at the altar and then goes after these people. Of course, they don't say anything they might have been doing at the time to provoke this. But he's physically throwing 3 men and 1 woman out of his church on 2 consecutive Sundays. And this is where the case ends. Because if you turn that paper over, you will see that he settled the case out of court. So he managed to pay and get off the hook and continues as the a minister of the church. There is an arrest warrant for him in the early 1760s, but it doesn't say what he did. And that is kind of where the paper trail ends, except in 1796 when he dies, in his will he endows Hartwick College, which is named in his honor. So from bad boy minister of Dutchess County to the founder of Hartwick College. I mean, I guess it takes all time. And then our final piece for today. And don't worry, this won't be too traumatic for the younger folks in the audience. A coroner's inquest. How many people have heard coroner's inquest?
Yeah.
All you fans of British crime drama, you know it.
Yeah.
So it's the 18th century in Dutchess County. And sometimes people die in weird ways in the 18th century. Sometimes they die on the side of the road and they're found the next day, which is what happens to the wonderfully named Sylvanus Garlicks in October of 1743. So what's the procedure? It's the 18th century, like 25 people live in Dutchess County. What are you going to do? Actually, seriously, the first census for Dutchess County, which was taken in the spring of 1714, found 447 people of all ages and all conditions, including a handful of slaves living in a county that at that point in time included all of Putnam County and everything up to Roloff Jansen's Kill in Columbia County. So well over 1,000 square miles, less than 450 people. Yeah. There are a few more by 1743. There's like 449. So if someone dies, if you happen to be going along, you find a body on the middle of the road, what do? You go find the county coroner. The county coroner then assembles a jury of 12 men, all freeholders of the county. They go to the scene, they look around, they do their little CSI thing, and then they decide whether this is an act of God or if this is a criminal offense that needs to be investigated into. And that's how we get to Sylvanus Garlicks. And let me know if actually having the typed out version there makes any difference, because the spelling, wow. So it's October 15th, 1743. Sylvanus Garlicks, it's somewhere in Rhinebeck, goes to visit his buddy Jacob Sornsberg. They have a little liquor while they're visiting. Sylvanus is there to reclaim his milk cow that he had loaned to Jacob Sornsberg. So it's maybe a day long, a little bit of tippling there. And at the end of the day, Garlicks heads home. Sornsberg walks about 3 miles with him before saying, all right, you're good for the rest of the way, right? I can give you your keys. Good to go? Garlicks is like, sure, man, I got this. So Sornsberg goes home. It's a cold night, October 15, 1743. Not like the weather today, cold, like real cold, real winter. So the next morning on October 16th, somebody finds Sylvanus Garlicks dead on the side of the road with a great big hole in his head, as the document says. So they go out, and remarkably within a matter of hours, they have the coroner there, they have 12 men, they look around and they find a blood trail on various pieces of stone and wood. They find the milk cow who's kind of chilling, looking around, probably looking for grass. And they conclude that Garlicks had fallen, hit his head, and then frozen to death because, in quote, it being a cold night, and thus ruled his death an accident. An accident, but they spell it E-X-C-E-D-E-N-T, so yay spelling. So that is our presentation for today. Do we have any questions?
Is that the half moon?
I don't know what ship that is. It comes from a 1787 court document. We find in the 80s and 90s the clerks get really bored, and instead of like making zigzags around things, they start drawing ships and horses.